I remember the day we first drove into Pine Hollow Estates. The trees were tall, the lawns were green. The houses looked like something out of a magazine about achieving the American dream. Emily squeezed my hand as we turned onto Maple Drive. "This is it, Daniel," she whispered, "our forever home." After 7 years of saving every extra dollar, of working weekends and holidays, we had finally done it. We had escaped our cramped apartment for a house with actual space, with a yard, with neighbors who waved as you drove past. The first month was everything we had hoped for. Quiet mornings, peaceful evenings on the porch, weekend barbecues where we met the couple next door and the retired teacher across the street. It felt like we had found our place in the world, a community. That feeling lasted exactly 32 days. They came on a Tuesday afternoon. 2 black SUVs with tinted windows parked directly in front of our driveway. 3 men stepped out wearing pressed black uniforms with patches that read HOA Enforcement Division across their chests. The tallest one approached me as I was retrieving the mail. His badge caught the sunlight. His clipboard looked official. "Mr. Reynolds," he said without introducing himself, "you have been issued a citation for improper waste receptacle placement." He handed me a paper that looked remarkably like a police ticket. "Your trash bins must be stored behind visual barriers when not in active use for collection. The fine is $275. I looked at my perfectly normal trash can sitting beside the garage. "I do not understand," I said. "They are not even visible from the street." The man did not smile. He did not frown. His face remained professionally blank. "The regulations are clear. Payment is due within 7 business days." He turned and walked back to his vehicle without another word. That evening I noticed our neighbor Mark hurriedly repainting his mailbox. "They got you too?" I asked. Mark glanced nervously at the street before answering. "Non-regulation color," he muttered. $300 fine if not corrected within 48 hours. "That seems excessive," I said. "Does the HOA handbook actually specify mailbox colors?" Mark looked at me like I had suggested setting fire to the American flag. "You do not question the enforcement division," he said quietly. "Not if you want to live here peacefully." Over the next 2 weeks, we watched as various neighbors scrambled to comply with increasingly bizarre requirements. Janet across the street replaced her garden gnomes. The Wilsons repainted their entirely acceptable beige door. The retired teacher removed her bird feeder while crying quietly. Emily began asking questions at the grocery store, at the local coffee shop, at neighborhood gatherings. Has the HOA always been this strict? The answers were vague, uncomfortable. People changed the subject or suddenly remembered urgent appointments. "Something is not right here," she told me one night. "Nobody will talk about them directly. It is like they are afraid." I decided to do some research. The county records office was surprisingly helpful. The clerk searched their database thoroughly before giving me news that confirmed my suspicions. "Pine Hollow Estates has no registered homeowners association," she said. "There never has been one." That evening we installed security cameras, not the obvious kind that would draw attention. Small, discreet models hidden in the porch light under the eaves, nestled between books on the outdoor shelf. We needed to protect ourselves, to gather evidence, to understand what was happening. The next day, 3 black SUVs arrived instead of the usual 2. 6 uniformed men approached our door. Their faces were harder now, their clipboards thicker with violation notices. "The Reynolds residence has been flagged for non-compliance," the leader announced. "Consider this your final warning before escalation procedures begin." Emily stood beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly. "Escalation to what exactly?" she asked. The man looked at her with empty eyes. "You do not want to find out, ma'am." As they drove away, I knew we had become targets, and I had no idea how dangerous these people truly were. It was supposed to be a routine late shift at the hospital, just another night of rounds and paperwork before coming home to Emily. I had texted her that I would be delayed by approximately 2 hours. She had responded with a simple heart emoji. That was the last I heard from her. The moment I turned onto our street, I knew something was wrong. The houses looked the same. The streetlights glowed with their usual yellow warmth, but there was a heaviness in the air, a stillness that did not belong. I accelerated slightly, suddenly eager to be home. Our house stood dark against the night sky. The porch light that Emily always left on for me was shattered glass fragments glittering on the concrete below. The front door stood partially open, swaying gently in the breeze. I called her name before I even reached the steps. No answer came from within. I moved through our home with growing dread. The living room was undisturbed. The kitchen was clean. Our bedroom was exactly as we had left it that morning. But Emily was gone. Her phone sat on the coffee table. Her purse hung on its usual hook. Her car keys rested in the ceramic bowl by the door. She had not left voluntarily. A knock at the door made me jump. Our neighbor, Mr. Wilson, stood on the porch looking nervous. His eyes kept darting to the street as he spoke. "I saw them take her," he whispered. "About 3 hours ago, 2 men in those black uniforms. They said they were escorting her to a compliance hearing." "What?" My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. "Where did they take her?" "Into one of those SUVs. She went quietly, did not fight them." He swallowed hard. "They said it was routine, that she would be back once the paperwork was processed." I called the sheriff's department immediately. The dispatcher sounded confused. "Sir, we do not conduct HOA compliance hearings. We do not have any record of officers dispatched to your address today." "But they had uniforms," I insisted. "Badges, they took my wife." "Sir, those were not our officers. I need to transfer you to detectives. This sounds like a potential abduction." Hours passed in a blur of questions and growing horror. No law enforcement agency claimed responsibility. No hospital had admitted Emily. No detention center had her name in their system. She had simply vanished. I reviewed our security footage with trembling hands. There they were, 2 men in those familiar black uniforms approaching our door, Emily answering, a brief conversation, her face showing confusion, then concern. Then she was walking between them to the waiting vehicle, not struggling, not screaming, just walking with the calm compliance of someone who still believed in legitimate authority. The license plates were obscured by mud or perhaps something intentionally applied. The men kept their faces angled away from the cameras, as if they knew exactly where to stand. These were not amateurs. This was not their first abduction. Morning came with no word. I had not slept, had not eaten, had barely moved from the phone. The detective assigned to the case arrived looking grim. "Mr. Reynolds, I need to be honest with you. This group has been on our radar, but we have not been able to build a solid case." "What group?" I demanded. "Who are these people?" "We do not know exactly. They operate in several counties, always with the same pattern. They establish themselves as homeowners associations where none legally exist. They collect fines. They enforce arbitrary rules. But this," he gestured around our empty house, "this escalation to taking people is new." "So you have nothing." The words tasted bitter. "We have suspicions but no proof. No victims have ever pressed charges. Most deny anything happened at all after they return." "Return?" A spark of hope flared. "So they do bring people back." Usually, after a day or two, he would not meet my eyes when he added, changed but physically unharmed. I contacted every media outlet that would listen. Most dismissed it as a domestic dispute or suggested Emily had left voluntarily. The few that showed interest backed away quickly when they could not verify the existence of this phantom HOA. The lawyer I retained looked increasingly uncomfortable as I explained the situation. Without evidence of who took her or where she is being held, there is little legal action I can pursue, he admitted. I was alone in this fight, completely alone. Until I found it, a small object partially hidden beneath the bushes near our front door, a badge. Not a real police badge, but the kind worn by the HOA enforcement officers. It must have fallen during the abduction. I turned it over in my hands, studying every detail. This single piece of metal was my first real clue, my first tangible connection to the people who had taken Emily, and I would follow it wherever it led, no matter how dark the path might become. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Every waking moment was dedicated to finding Emily. I started with local forums and social media groups. At first, people were reluctant to engage. Private messages went unanswered. Public posts were quickly removed by moderators. It was as if an invisible wall had been erected around the very topic. Then I created a more innocuous post, looking for information about neighborhood governance in Pine Hollow and surrounding areas, research purposes only. I avoided trigger words like HOA or enforcement. Within hours, my inbox contained 3 messages. Each sender requested anonymity. Each shared fragments of similar experiences. On the 3rd day of my investigation, I received a call from a blocked number. The man identified himself only as Greg from Lakeside Township, 1 county over. I read between the lines of your post, he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. My son was taken 6 months ago. He came back after one night. He has not been the same since. My heart raced. What happened? Who took him? Men in black uniforms. They drove SUVs with tinted windows. They said he had violated community standards with his basketball hoop. Greg's voice broke. He was 17 years old. Did you report it? Of course. No one believed us, and afterward my son refused to speak about it. He dismantled the basketball hoop himself the next day. He flinches when vehicles slow down near our house. We agreed to meet in person. Greg turned out to be a former Marine with steady hands and watchful eyes. He brought photographs of the men who had taken his son. The uniforms matched those I had seen. The vehicles were identical. It could not be coincidence. My son said something about a warehouse, Greg told me. Something about concrete floors and metal doors. That is all I could get from him. The badge I had found became my focus. No identifying department or jurisdiction was marked on it. Just a generic emblem and the words Community Enforcement Officer. I traced the manufacturer through a series of dead ends before discovering it came from a novelty supply warehouse called Authority Outfitters, 2 towns over. The sales clerk was young and talkative. Oh yeah, we sell complete security packages. Badges, uniforms, patches, the whole setup. No verification needed. Cash and carry. Who buys these? I asked casually. All sorts. Private security mostly. Some film productions. There was a big order last year for some community group. Bought enough gear for like 20 officers. Do you remember who placed that order? The clerk shrugged. Some company called Neighborhood Integrity Services paid cash. Neighborhood Integrity Services did not exist in any business directory. but the name appeared in complaints filed with the Better Business Bureau across 3 counties. Always the same pattern, always dismissed for insufficient evidence. I created a map on my dining room wall. Red pins for reported sightings of the black SUVs, blue pins for homes that had been targeted, yellow pins for people who had been taken, green pins for witnesses willing to speak. Slowly, the connections emerged like constellations becoming visible in a darkening sky. Every victim had challenged their authority in some way. Janet had questioned a fine. The Hendersons had requested documentation. The Patels had asked for identification. And Emily, my brilliant, fearless Emily, had been asking questions all over town. The timing of the incidents revealed a pattern too. They operated on a rotating schedule, targeting different neighborhoods on different days. Never the same area twice in 1 week. Never the same violation 2 days in a row. It was systematic, organized, deliberate. I discovered more through persistent networking with other victims. Some described detention in a room with concrete floors. Others mentioned the smell of industrial chemicals. One woman recalled seeing farm equipment through a small window. The most chilling pattern emerged from those who had returned. They all described similar psychological tactics: isolation, disorientation, hours of lectures about community standards and the importance of compliance. No physical torture, but something perhaps more insidious: the methodical breaking of individual will. My dining room began to resemble a detective's office. Maps, timelines, photographs, notes upon notes. I had moved beyond grief into something colder and more focused. I was not just a husband searching for his wife anymore. I had become an investigator tracking predators, and I was getting closer. The pieces were falling into place. Now I needed to set a trap. The plan formed with crystal clarity. If these people operated on patterns, then disrupting their pattern would provoke a response. If they targeted those who questioned their authority, then I would become the most questioning, most defiant homeowner in Pine Hollow Estates. I began with visible, deliberate violations of their made-up rules. I painted my front door bright red, a color they had specifically cited as prohibited. I installed solar lights along my walkway without submitting their required approval forms. I placed 3 garden gnomes, apparently the most offensive lawn ornaments in their twisted rulebook, prominently in my front yard. While creating these visible provocations, I prepared invisible countermeasures. Every inch of my property now contained hidden cameras. Not just the commercial security systems that anyone could buy, but military-grade equipment borrowed from Greg's connections. Motion sensors, audio recorders, backup power supplies. Nothing would go unrecorded. I contacted a private investigator named Malone, a former police detective with a reputation for discretion and determination. I need someone to be ready to follow a vehicle at a moment's notice, I explained. Someone who can remain undetected while tracking movements to a destination. Malone studied the evidence I had gathered. "You understand the risk you are taking," he said. It was not a question. "They have my wife," I replied simply. We established a signal system. If I triggered a specific sequence on my phone, his team would mobilize immediately. He would be parked 3 blocks away, ready to follow whoever came for me. A second investigator would be positioned to record everything from a discreet distance. The final preparation was the most difficult. I had to appear vulnerable while being completely prepared. I had to seem isolated while having substantial backup in place. I contacted the FBI through a former patient who now worked in their field office. Agent Rivera listened to my story with increasing concern. "What you are describing crosses county lines," she noted. "That potentially puts it in federal jurisdiction, but we need evidence. Concrete, irrefutable evidence." "I am going to get that for you," I promised. They came exactly as I had predicted. 3 days after my provocations began, 2 black SUVs pulled up outside my house. 4 uniformed men approached my door with the practiced synchronization of people who had done this dozens of times before. I activated the recording systems and opened the door before they could knock. "Mr. Reynolds," the leader said, "you have accumulated 17 violations of community standards in the past 72 hours. You are required to attend a compliance hearing immediately." I feigned nervous confusion. I would like to see some identification first, and documentation of these alleged violations. His face hardened. Refusal to comply will result in immediate sanctions. "What kind of sanctions exactly?" I asked, making sure my voice was captured clearly by the hidden microphones. "The kind that made your wife understand the importance of community standards." There it was, the admission, the confirmation that they had taken Emily, that this was the same group. I could feel my heart pounding but kept my expression neutral. "I need to lock up the house first," I said, pretending to give in. They followed me inside. I moved slowly, triggering the emergency alert to Malone as I pretended to search for my keys. The tallest officer grew impatient. "That is enough stalling," he said, grabbing my arm. "You are coming with us now." They did not handcuff me. They did not need to. The implicit threat was enough. The same unspoken coercion that had worked on dozens of frightened homeowners before me. I allowed them to escort me to the waiting SUV, struggling just enough to seem realistic but not enough to make them suspicious. As they drove away from my house, I caught a glimpse of Malone's unmarked car pulling out several blocks behind us. The trap was working. We drove for nearly 40 minutes, leaving the suburbs behind for increasingly rural landscapes. Eventually, we turned onto a gravel road partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. The warehouse sat in a clearing, surrounded by neglected farmland. No signage, no identifying features, just a massive concrete structure with small, high windows and heavy metal doors. 2 more black SUVs were parked near the entrance. They escorted me inside, unaware that every moment was being documented, every location noted, every face recorded, unaware that their reign of terror was about to end. The waiting was excruciating. 3 hours in a cold room with concrete floors and metal chairs, exactly as the other victims had described. My captors took turns delivering lectures about community standards and the importance of compliance. They showed me photographs of my violations, with precise documentation of each offense. The entire process was designed to wear down resistance through tedium and intimidation. I pretended to break down gradually, showing the progression they expected to see. First defiance, then anger, then resignation. Finally, the beginning stages of acceptance, all while gathering information, counting doors, noting security measures, listening for voices from other rooms. There were others being held. I could hear them, muffled conversations, occasional sounds of distress. I caught glimpses through partially opened doors, small rooms with bare furnishings, detention cells disguised as offices. Malone would have completed his surveillance by now. The FBI would be analyzing the location, planning entry points, gathering their tactical team. I just needed to remain calm and play my role for a few more hours. Night fell. The warehouse grew quieter as most of the staff departed. Only a skeleton crew remained for the overnight shift. They moved me to a smaller room with a single chair and a bright overhead light. Classic interrogation setup. Amateur but effective. "Your wife was difficult at first," one of the remaining officers told me, "but she came to understand our community values eventually." "Where is she now?" I demanded. He smiled thinly. "Nearby, completing her reorientation program." At precisely 4:32 a.m., the world erupted into controlled chaos. The first sign was the sudden cut of power. Emergency lights kicked on, bathing the warehouse in an eerie red glow. Then came the sound, concussive devices designed to disorient rather than harm. The walls seemed to vibrate with the tactical team's coordinated entry. "FBI, on the ground now." The commands echoed through the concrete corridors, professional and unyielding. My door burst open. Two agents in full tactical gear secured me, quickly determining I was the reporting victim rather than a suspect. "Reynolds," one confirmed. I nodded weakly. "We need to find my wife," I said. "Emily Reynolds." "Teams are clearing the building room by room," he assured me. "If she is here, we will find her." Outside the small room, the operation continued with military precision. Suspects were being zip-tied and identified. Some tried to flee through emergency exits only to find additional agents waiting. Others attempted to destroy evidence, shredding documents, wiping computers. Too late. Much too late. I followed behind the tactical team as they methodically cleared each section of the warehouse. Other victims were being located and evacuated. Some looked shell-shocked. Others wept with relief. I searched each face desperately for Emily. The storage area in the back of the facility contained 6 steel rooms, shipping containers modified into detention cells. The tactical team breached each one carefully. The 5th container held Emily. She sat on a narrow cot, bruised and disheveled but alive. Her eyes, when they met mine, contained both recognition and something distant, something they had put there during her captivity. I rushed to her side as the medics assessed her condition. "Daniel," her voice was hoarse, "how did you find me?" "I never stopped looking," I told her, holding her hand as if it might disappear again if I let go. "Never." The ambulance arrived within minutes. Emily was wrapped in blankets, an IV providing fluids and medication. I rode beside her, our fingers intertwined as the sirens wailed into the dawn. Behind us, news vans were already arriving. Reporters positioned cameras to capture the procession of handcuffed suspects being led to waiting police vehicles. By sunrise, the story was breaking across every major network. Fake HOA militants arrested in multi-county operation. Our quiet neighborhood nightmare had become national news. The courthouse steps became a daily spectacle. News cameras, protesters holding signs demanding maximum sentences, supporters of the victims creating a solemn corridor through which Emily and I walked each morning. The trial of the 12 ringleaders of the fake HOA enterprise had captured public attention in a way few legal proceedings ever had. The prosecution built their case methodically. 117 victims from 4 counties, systematic intimidation, illegal detainment, impersonation of officials, extortion. The charges filled page after page of court documents. The evidence room contained thousands of items, fake badges, uniforms, citation books, financial records detailing over $2 million collected in fraudulent fines. Emily was scheduled to testify on the 3rd day. She had recovered physically, but psychological wounds heal more slowly. The night before her testimony, she sat by our bedroom window, staring at the street below. "What if they do not believe me?" she whispered. I sat beside her, careful not to crowd her space. She still startled easily at sudden movements. "They will believe you. The evidence is overwhelming." Evidence is not the same as experience. Her hands trembled slightly. How do I make them understand what it was like in that metal room, the psychological pressure, the way they made me doubt my own perceptions? When she took the stand the next morning, Emily looked small beneath the towering architecture of the courtroom. But her voice, when she began to speak, carried clearly to every corner. "They came to our door on a Tuesday afternoon," she began. "Two men in uniforms that looked official. They said there had been complaints about our garden, that I needed to attend a community standards hearing." She described the drive to the warehouse, the isolation, the systematic breaking down of resistance through a combination of disorientation, sleep deprivation, and persistent psychological pressure. They kept showing me pictures of our neighborhood, pictures of our neighbors complying with their rules. They told me that resistance only brought pain to the community, that I was being selfish by questioning authority. During cross-examination, the defense attorney attempted to minimize her experience. "So you were never physically harmed, correct? Never actually restrained?" Emily's composure cracked momentarily. Tears flowed freely as she leaned toward the microphone. "They did not need to chain me to make me a prisoner. They did not need to hit me to cause pain. They took something from me that I am still trying to get back. My sense of safety, my belief in community, my trust in authority." The courtroom fell silent, not the restless silence of boredom, but the heavy silence of collective realization. Even the judge was visibly moved, removing his glasses to wipe his eyes discreetly. Other victims followed with their own testimonies. The retired teacher who had been held for questioning the removal of her bird feeder. The college student detained for playing music during prohibited hours. The elderly man who spent 2 days in isolation for improper mailbox maintenance. Each story built upon the last, revealing the full scope of the operation. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on the investigation, the evidence gathering, the pattern recognition. I described setting the trap, working with law enforcement, and the moment I found Emily in that steel container. "This was not a misunderstanding," I told the jury. "This was not overzealous community management. This was a deliberate criminal enterprise designed to exploit our trust in institutions and our desire to be good neighbors." The defense strategy shifted as the evidence mounted. They attempted to portray their clients as misunderstood community organizers who had simply overstepped boundaries in their zeal to maintain neighborhood standards. They brought in character witnesses who testified to the defendant's community involvement and charitable works. "My clients may have been misguided in their methods," the lead defense attorney argued in his closing statement. "But their intentions were to create beautiful, orderly communities where property values would be protected." The prosecutor stood slowly in response. She was a small woman with a commanding presence. She approached the jury box with measured steps. "Intentions," she said quietly. "Let us talk about intentions. The systematic targeting of individuals who questioned authority, the detailed financial records showing millions in collected fines, the warehouse equipped with detention facilities." She paused, letting the facts settle in the air between herself and the jury. "These are not the actions of misguided community organizers. These are the calculated methods of predators." The jury deliberated for 3 days. The media coverage never stopped. Legal experts debated potential outcomes on every major network. Emily and I waited in a small conference room in the courthouse, barely speaking, holding hands across the table. When the verdict came, it was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following week. We returned to that same courtroom to hear the final chapter of our ordeal. Judge Harrison was known for his measured temperament. His sentencing statements were typically brief and to the point. But as he addressed the 12 defendants standing before him, his voice carried an unusual edge of emotion. "The court sentences each defendant to 854 years, he pronounced. 1 year for each day that members of these communities lived in fear, without possibility of parole. The mathematical precision of the sentence, 854 years, resonated through the courtroom like the final note of a symphony. Not a celebration, not an ending, but a recognition that justice, at its best, sees both the forest and the trees. The morning we returned to Pine Hollow Estates felt surreal. The houses looked the same. The streets followed the same gentle curves. The trees still cast dappled shadows across manicured lawns, but everything had changed. Neighbors stood at the end of our driveway, not with clipboards or citation books, but with casserole dishes and welcome back signs. Mark, who had once repainted his mailbox in frightened compliance, now sported a deliberately purple one with reflective stars. Janet's yard featured not just her original garden gnomes but an entire village of whimsical creatures. "We did not know what to say before," Mark admitted as he helped carry our bags inside. "We were all so afraid for so long." Emily moved through the house slowly, reacquainting herself with each room, running her fingers along familiar surfaces, opening and closing doors as if to reassure herself they could still be opened, still be closed, still be controlled by her own hands. The first night was difficult. Every sound startled her awake. Every shadow contained potential threats. I found her sitting in the kitchen at 3 in the morning, all the lights blazing. "I keep expecting to hear their vehicles," she confessed. "I keep waiting for the knock at the door." Recovery came in small steps. Emily started a support group that met every Wednesday evening in the community center. Reclaiming Space, she called it. Victims from across the 4 counties gathered to share stories, strategies, and progress. The retired teacher brought cookies. The college student played gentle music. The elderly man with the non-regulation mailbox took detailed minutes of each meeting. "Trauma does not just disappear when justice is served," Emily explained during one session. "It transforms. Our job is to guide that transformation toward healing rather than bitterness." I focused my energy on systemic change. Working with state legislators, I helped draft new oversight laws for homeowners associations. The Reynolds regulations required transparent governance, accessible records, and regular audits. More importantly, they created a state-level review board where homeowners could report suspicious or excessive enforcement. The problem was not just 12 criminals, I testified before the state committee. The problem was a system that allowed them to operate unchallenged. That made questioning authority seem dangerous or impolite. Pine Hollow Estates established a legitimate community association, transparent, democratic, and explicitly limited in scope. The former victims became its first board members. Their initial resolution banned black SUVs from official use and established a right to question policy that protected residents who challenged decisions or requested documentation. 3 months after the trial concluded, the town held a dedication ceremony. A small garden had been created at the entrance to our neighborhood. In its center stood a simple stone memorial engraved with words chosen by the victims themselves. "Where questioning is welcome, tyranny cannot take root." Emily spoke at the ceremony. Her voice was stronger now. Her hands no longer trembled when she addressed crowds. "What happened to us was not about property values or community standards," she told the gathered residents. It was about power and fear, about how easily we surrender our autonomy when someone claims authority convincingly enough. She gestured to the memorial. This stone reminds us to ask questions, to verify claims, to stand together rather than suffer alone. Healing continued in unexpected ways. The warehouse that had been a place of detention was purchased by the county and transformed into a community resource center. The steel containers were removed, the concrete floors covered with warm wood. Where intimidation once ruled, children now attended art classes and seniors gathered for book discussions. 1 year after the raid, Emily and I sat on our front porch watching the sunset. Our door remained bright red, a small act of defiance that had become a symbol of freedom. 3 garden gnomes still stood guard by our walkway, now joined by a 4th wearing a tiny FBI jacket, a gift from Agent Rivera. "Are you happy here?" I asked Emily. "We could still move if you wanted, start fresh somewhere else." She considered the question seriously, her eyes tracking the familiar contours of our street. Our neighbors waved as they walked dogs or pushed strollers. Janet was installing a fountain shaped like a dragon in her front yard, something that would have been unthinkable during the reign of the fake HOA. "This is our home," Emily said finally. "We fought for it, we reclaimed it." She reached for my hand, her grip firm and certain. "And now we get to live in it, on our terms." That night, for the first time since her return, Emily slept soundly until morning. And so did I.